What if I told you that despite the changes, you could still invade and do this to Viegos? You could still counter jungle and do this to Graves. And you could play Neeko and Hecarim jungle and do whatever this is. Yes, they sped the minions up. Yes, they made them hyper-focused on turrets. They removed our blasting code from 5 minutes and they did a whole bunch of other stuff. You know, like rework every item in the entire game. All of those things are absolutely irrelevant when you have the fundamentals of jungling at your fingertips. In this video, I will explain how exactly you must jungle after these mid-season changes going forward and how to deal with the radically sped up early game that we are now seeing. And don't forget, I have actually updated my jungle improvement PDF to have all the information necessary to take you from meta to meta from season to season, along with in-depth jungle video courses for your MMR to take you to the next level faster, better, stronger, and one-on-one coaching and a coaching VOD library along with a whole bunch of reviews to show you just how great it is. Virkayu.gg is a jungler's learning paradise. Click the link in the description below to become the jungle diff forever. Be it growth tips sold separately. Okay, so as you can see from this VOLIBEAR clip here, tower diving is still possible, but if you go in and all the minions are focusing on the turret, they're not going to swap over and help you do damage. You also just have to make sure you're tower juggling aggro correctly, using the right amount of HP, having your support execute to maximize, you know, the actual dive. I say this because you can still do it, you just have to do it properly, and a lot of people are doing it like this, and as long as you outplay it correctly, you'll end up getting a lot of kills. And of course, I'm seeing a lot of people dive and die. And so let's jump into our first game here, Viego vs Rengar. We also have a Karthus game, a Neeko, a Hecarim. Gonna show you all the different styles that we are seeing because it's very important in this particular meta. Largely, this is because of certain changes have basically made the game a lot faster. There's a lot of running around skirmishing, low CSPM, and I don't think that's the best way to play the game. The best way to play the game is to be measured in your approach and to use your fundamentals appropriately. You cannot stop Riot from doing the change, accept it, implement it, and just carry on smurfing. The Rengar here recognizes, okay, Viego started topside, he's going down, I'm going topside, going down. Your full clear speed is very important. Take the bottom scuttle, bottom lane is ungankable, let's cut through mid lane. We'll do the old school double scuttle tech. Do you remember that from a few seasons ago? Actually, it was last season as well. Full clear, double scuttle, look for a lane to gank, and of course you can base or resequence. And as I said, you're gonna see a bit more spam ganking in certain moments. Some junglers are taking it to the extreme, but the Rengar here uses it intelligently. Full clear, double scuttle, I can invest the time now. The Viego would have had to go back to base, which he does, and now he's gonna try and counter jungle, which isn't exactly the most intelligent thing against one of the best junglers on this patch, and the move is largely irrational, even though you do have itemization advantage. And your mid laner has TP, his mid laner also has TP, and he can just rotate much quicker. Thus, we get a payoff here as Rengar, we can take our Raptors, we can go and take our tier 2 Krugs as well, and if we were pressing tab to track the Viego, we'd know that he'd done a full clear and nothing else. So where's he gonna go next? He could swap over and go to the bottom side, but looking at that bottom wave, he decides just to go to the top. But from Rengar's perspective, we don't know exactly what he's going to be doing. And so we go down, we take our Grump to get that juicy experience for a refresh. We have Dirk, we have double longswords. But that plant is gone. Already you're seeing the impact here from those changes. No 5-minute blasting code means you can't hippity-hoppity this wall and go for the gank when they're pushed. You have to use more classical approaches. Is it warded? Were you tracking that control ward that is inherently actually placed? But if we weren't tracking it, you would be caught out going the prototypical way, and thus a Viego would collapse in on you. So it's important to press tab to see which laners have control wards, watch when they dip out of vision, press tab again when they return, and kind of guess where they've placed that control ward. It also means that we kind of presume that the Viego will be pathing down in some capacity, so what's the best thing you can do in these situations? Lane gank. We're going to see a lot of lane ganking now instead of using the blasting cone at this particular time in the game. And because of the minion wave increased speed, you can see here we don't wait. We see the gap, we pull the trigger, we go. Now the classical thing is, hey, is Viego in the area potentially? If you went top down, most likely. If you went bottom top, he would have cut down here sooner, and thus he has not shown anywhere. He could be, and never mind. Hey, at least you could turn the kill back, but ideally we use a bit of brain cells here and go back the long way, respect the possibility, also respect the possibility that they could now invade your blue side. That's where you can really leverage that control what you have to protect yourself against such plays. Now, a couple of things that are fundamental to the game that will never change. If you do die, or you do see the enemy jungler do something on the other side of the map, what outside in rule principle can I use to take away something from them as well? At the same time, what can I do in terms of my level 6 spike? While the enemy jungler is preoccupied doing donkey dragon things from Shrek, we can go ahead and, kill the Yone. We can go ahead and then do some counter jungling, take a Scuttle Crab. And then of course we see the faster waves where we can still cut and cheese and chunk. Again, you're seeing a bit of the wave stuff with the Viego going for a tower dive and losing his flash and getting nothing for it. So as Rengar, you can go, thank you so much for the Grump and the Herald. Or you can say, thank you for the Grump, let me try and tower dive the Yone, and I can also die. As I said, you're going to see a lot of people dying with this kind of stuff in this new meta. Very fast-paced, a lot of unnecessary death and despair in terms of junglers and laners all diving. But hey, you can respawn, clean up some kills on the bottom side. My advice is then to obviously go back to base, focus on that Herald, focus on shutting down the Viego, but you can of course go for an ill-advised invade on the red, and this is where that randomness and that really fast-paced kind of people doing whatever they want thing is happening. Obviously, I'm including the deaths here because it's important to note that all of our decisions aren't always going to be perfect, but in this particular game phase when the game is sped up and people are playing more aggressively, being more measured is going to be better in the long term. Now, of course, if you do or don't do that, it doesn't really matter because as long as you invade and kill the Viego knowing he's going to go top side as you follow basic jungle tracking, link in the description below for that, and you take the Herald and then you repeat gank top lane, and then of course, they've changed the plates to become more resistance based, you know, as more plates are taken, they become even tankier, tonkier, and scale with the amount of people around you. Well, there's only 2 of you, and the Herald does true damage, and you have Yumi's plus another serrated Dirk, so, you know, hit the turret, activate the Herald, elevate the game state into the mid game, and of course, take over. In this next game, I want to show you this fast-paced aggressiveness and how it can cause a lot of sadness to one of the most oppressive junglers in the game, but also how you can correct it, and also how you can counter it with some methodical jungling. So, Graves gets prio and then steals some raptors away from the Kha'Zix, who now is just crying and Annie can do nothing about it. The Karthus is sequencing bottom side, will see this and will complete his full clear in record time. Most importantly, if you're a Kha'Zix here and yes, you will compromise, just get your level 3, now look to see where the Karthus is going. You know he's done, you know he's going to show bot lane, your bot lane knows he's going to show bot lane, and a 3v3 skirmish will develop. So good job by the Kha'Zix to correct, good job by the Karthus to do what he wants to do, although now it comes down to mechanical team fighting in an early game sense. But we can very much agree that the Karthus and the blue team did not think necessarily about the Kha'Zix, and they were definitely compromised by overchasing just a little bit into the river, so well played to the Kha'Zix, he gets an assist. Karthus still comes out way ahead though. But as the Kha'Zix, now you know the bottom scuttle is free for you because you have tier 1 wolves and tier 1 grub. The fact that you died there is really, really bad because it's only like 340 or so, and now you're not going to be able to go to your Krugs and your Raptors either. You can't go fight top lane because Sion has prio. You can't fight the Karthus one-on-one. Again, the Karthus has flash, he should 100% have exhaust here. But here's an unsuspecting benefit of the minion wave changes. Both junglers again will use the outside in rule to take the objective furthest away from them, in this case a Scuttle Crab. Karthus though can extend this rule to the second spawn Krugs coming at 420, the second spawn Raptors, it will come around 435 to 445, and the Kha'Zix will just go from the outside scuttle back to his Gromp and Wolves. What the Karthus can do though is of course wait for the minion wave to cross in front of the Krugs so he doesn't get spotted. Before this would take a little bit longer, now it takes a little bit less, so he can enhance the counter jungling and make it more efficient. But remember that the counter jungling that we do at this particular phase as it crosses over 5 minutes, we're not gonna have the blasting cone to now escape. We can't use it to circumvent vision, we can't use it to get good ganking angles when the wave is just right. If you have no map scaling like a Karthus, you have to learn basically to time it once more like the old days where you have to walk around walls, track vision properly, use your scan appropriately, both now double charged instead of 1 charge. We can gank top lane from this great angle of approach. Remember, counter jungling still gives us great angles for ganks. That won't change. What does change obviously is the enemy jungler is now gonna go deep and take our camps as well. So we'll ensure we take his Raptors. We can then go to Gromp and Wolves as well. Kha'Zix can then revenge kill onto the Graves for the, you know, distortion of his early clear, and in this case he gave up the Krugs to do so, but that's fine. It's absolutely the better play. Most of you would stick to the Krugs, maybe look for a Dive bot lane, but Kalista got buffed, your items got buffed, she's gonna be getting buffed again. You know, why would we kind of coin flip that with the waves going so quickly? It's not really diveable, it's not really gankable. Let's just get the free gank mid lane with Yanni, and you know, that's way better than Krugs. Eyes up jungling, jungler, don't stick your head in the sand, don't farm AFK, and of course don't spam game 4 CS per minute. There's a nice hybrid approach as you're seeing from both of these games. Now Karthus could go back to base, you might think, hey, that's a good play, and then I say, 999, mein kleiner Schatz. We stay out, we take Krugs, we get 6, we gank bot. Why? Because now we have tempo over the Kha'Zix, who would have had to go back to base after showing mid lane again. This kind of stay out, get a tempo advantage is huge. It's also one of the jungle fundamentals from the 10 jungling commandments. It's also basic common sense to maintain jungle tempo control over other junglers in higher elo, and especially if you want to climb through diamond, and especially if you want to get to diamond. So basically, if you are a human being who jungles, it's good, no matter your elo. Kha'Zix sees the Graves but takes a scuttle, now can hold the bottom wave. It's something I have been seeing a little bit more of in terms of your highly mobile champions that can really sequence quadrants, go back to the lanes, hold them, shove them, and then carry on about their business. It's obviously always been great in the mid lane, but it's also great in the side lanes now as well. Again, it always was. We have had the nerf, but with everything being faster, yeah, we can go for the gank, we can take the scuttle, we can hold the wave, we can go farm again, we can gank another thing, take a dragon. It's really quite quick. So if you're a good jungler in terms of stitching together decisions, you will definitely notice this kind of decision-making speed up, but of course you'll be a bit more comfortable than those who kind of lived in the moment. Now of course we see the Kha'Zix holding waves, we want to go counter jungling, but the Graves is a little bit low in mana. Sure, he's done an okay job, but the fact of the matter is that Kha'Zix is able to chunk him, get in his face a bit, and now he's going back to base, and he's gonna show back in the mid lane. We can't go and coin flip that Herald because we'll have numbers disadvantage. Immediately recognizes the number disadvantage he would have going for the Herald, swaps to the bottom side quadrant, can easily go for the Hextech Dragon. That's really exactly what I was talking about in my tweets earlier. I was saying in the thread, when you're doing objectives, how many camps, what other counter jungling could you do, what objectives could you do instead of coin flipping a 50-50 or taking a losing fight? See, if Graves was full HP fresh from base and could easily hold the Kha'Zix, sure, we could just go counter jungle everything, get top lane, create numbers advantage, and then take the Herald, but obviously that didn't happen, so we take the Dragon. The Kha'Zix does the logical thing knowing this is happening and counter jungles. Logically, the Karthus would want to do the same thing, but the red team's bottom lane says, no, Mountain Shoal Path, and the Grim Reaper has to go back to base and basically say, well, I know you did that, so I'm gonna go straight to the top lane, kill him, take your whole side again, cheese the enemy top laner again, cutting the wave even though they sped up. Force your ADC to hold, so you're gonna blow open the bottom lane turret and really compromise your lane even though you think you helped them, because trust me, you really didn't. Now the first turrets are down and the chess pieces will move around and the mid game will commence. And so I will highlight this last example here just for some more context, and then I'll explain the mid game decision in a few minutes. Now what you're going to see here is a Neeko getting first blood. It's largely irrelevant to what I'm talking about. Both junglers will do a full clear down. And this might be a bit more representative of what you're seeing in the majority of your games. The Neeko, or Tiny Krug, wants to go for the Scuttle Crab. The Hecarim does as well. We don't really have bottom lane rotation, so the Neeko says, I have to back off and goes to the mid lane. The problem is the Hecarim is pretty quick, so what he's gonna do is rotate as well. What ends up happening is a good old-fashioned fist fight. Both junglers then move themselves into the topside Scuttle region where Gragas rotates, everyone else rotates, and this is the high-paced, aggressive people doing random things that I really want to avoid. How do you avoid this if you're the Neeko? How do you avoid this if you're the Hecarim? Regardless of whether you're gonna say it's worth or it looked great because the Gragas had a crashing wave and he could rotate, I don't really want to always compromise my laners in this way. Shadowing mid lane to get that first gank off, the counter gank or whatever, that's great because Jace went in for a trade when he shouldn't have, knowing the Hecarim was downside. I really wish laners would think about their trades relevant to jungle tempo, but they never do, never have done, and never will do. Now you could argue, okay, Gragas is coming down, let's go fight for the Scuttle Crab. The most important thing here is just to leverage the rotation, try and get the outsmart, but you don't want to die. The reason you don't want to die is because now you have the second spawn Gromp, second spawn Wolves, and oh yeah, you have the Dark Seal, so you want to maximize those stacks here as well. In a worst case scenario, basically just go back to base, keep your Dark Seal, and now go on and sequence again, get 6 as soon as possible, and use that advantage. Just use that measured approach and try and tape yourself back just a little bit. Because now, of course, she sequences down, Hecarim goes back to base, he's gonna go topside, we go and take a cheeky look inside his jungle, we then move on down for the bottom lane gank, Hecarim decides to gank mid lane, gets the kill, and now you're just having more skirmishes, more unnecessary aggressiveness. There's not a lot of, hey, what can I do pathing-wise here that allows me to get something where the Hecarim isn't located? And so this was a great representation of what if both junglers are pathing in the same direction, no one wants to give, and we just all fight. Laners rotate and we all just fight continuously, permanently, and don't think about our win conditions. Just don't do that. You should never have done it in the first place. Don't do it now. Hopefully you can see the counter jungling and farming cadence tempo as you watch highlights from the early game Fiesta from the Kha'Zix and the Karthus, a great example of adapting your pathing when randomness happens, how to still get back into the game, how the Karthus can still use counter jungling and basic fundamentals using the wave states, the new waves, to get some great angles. Just think of it like a TV remote. It still does exactly what you want it to do, but the buttons may be moved around a few places, but they're all the same buttons. Rengar showed you the aggressive nature of the game and how to play around the new reality, but also some downsides to that when you make the wrong read. But as long as you understand game state elevation into the mid game, that is when you are always well positioned to carry. Now the mid game from 40 minutes onwards, remember the minions will go back to usual, so the typical mid game macro is standard as always has been. Yes, the TP changes are important. The 10-minute TP from 14 is huge. So obviously pay attention to who has TP and when they're going to be rotating to things in the later stages of the early game, which might mean around that 14-15 minute mark you don't have TPs available when we usually would have due to the unleashed timer before. But largely, if you adhere to these jungling principles and basically use the fundamentals I teach you in all the videos over many years, you'll be absolutely fine to adapt. Just don't be like the third example where it just evolves into random fiestas, coin flips, and fights over absolutely nothing for no reason. The worst way to play the game is an unmeasured jungle approach. Might as well just play Silas and go 4 CSPM if that's your thing. As always, if you want to take your jungling from the early game into a victory, the best ways are on your screen now. Either dominate the mid game ahead or behind, or dominate team fights ahead or behind.